Good Morning Show with Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Guam is resilient, but today, too many families are being stretched thin. Costs are rising faster than paychecks. Neighborhoods don't feel as safe as they should. Healthcare is harder to access, and for many, opportunity feels just out of reach. That's not the future we should accept. When Guam has faced its hardest moments, Frank Blas Jr. has been there, leading, from guiding recovery after Super Typhoon Pongsonghua to serving as Guam's first Homeland Security Advisor, to strengthening public safety and emergency preparedness. He's built a career on protecting our people and delivering results when it matters. He understands how to make government respond, act, and serve. Dr. Mary Okada has spent her life expanding opportunity. As a nationally recognized education leader, she has helped thousands of students gain the skills to succeed, whether in the workforce, higher education, or public service. Her work has strengthened Guam's workforce pipeline, supported economic growth, and opened doors for the next generation. She knows that investing in people, education, job training, and community health is how we build a stronger island. Together, they bring proven leadership across the issues that matter most. Safer communities, a stronger, more prepared government, better access to healthcare, real pathways to good-paying jobs, and an economy that works for local families, not against them. They don't just talk about solutions, they've delivered them. This election comes down to one question: who is ready to lead on day one? With a record of service, results, and leadership Guam can trust, Frank Blas Jr. and Mary Okada are ready. Frank Blas Jr. for governor, Dr. Mary Okada for lieutenant governor. Tested, trusted leaders. Ready on day one.
A major milestone happened yesterday when David Lubofsky was informed by the Guam Board of Medical Examiners that a case that he filed against one of the doctors involved in the death of his son, Asher Dean Lubofsky, had received a public letter of reprimand, but there's still some stuff that needs to be hammered out. This conceivably puts to an end a very long journey that David Lubofsky and all of us in the community have been on, at least when it comes to the case of Asher Dean Lubofsky, but certainly not when it comes to David Lubofsky's larger fight, bigger journey to reform the Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a message that Mary Torres has put out, pushing for answers regarding from the congressman, from her political opponent in the primary election this coming August 1. She's pressing for answers about what the congressman is doing in just a few days, 7,000 people are going to fall off the SNAP rolls and are not going to have access to what they used to rely on or what they currently rely on in order to eat. If we have time, I want to talk a little bit about BJ Cruz's talk before the Guam Chamber of Commerce, where he has implored all of us to read the audits that are coming out of his office. And I got to tell you, every single audit that has been coming out, there was a period where all the audits were saying that everything was okay, except there are some questions here and some questions there, and you have some overdue stuff here. But then came a period where the government of Guam stopped providing the information on a timely basis to the Office of Public Accountability. And once that information started to come in, the audits started to come back to us, and the audits are showing some hanky-panky, some weird behavior. Before I cut to the commercial break, I want to apologize for last night. I wasn't able to have the Troy Torres show last night. My boyfriend has vertigo, and he had a very bad spell and was in a lot of pain, and I didn't want a situation where I was, doing a show and he got up for whatever reason, and then he would fall down. It's just, and so, I was not able to have last night's show, and I apologize for that. On the other side of the commercial break, we'll talk about Asher Dean Lubofsky and some semblance of justice that he has received as of yesterday. Stick with us.
Every day I realize and I know I have enormous responsibility. For me, I wake up knowing that I have a lot of things going on. I don't know what my day is going to be like, but I wake up knowing that I have a big responsibility to do, and I need to do my best every single day. That is what I think about. It's a combination, actually, of two people. My grandpa, this is my mom's dad. His name is Jose Franquisicomo. He was an accountant, so not necessarily an exciting job, but gosh, he loved to farm. He was very neat, but he was very patient. I'd never seen somebody so strong and patient than him. He didn't overuse his authority, but you would know when he was upset about something, and nobody would ever mess with that. My dad, he didn't grow up with a dad. My grandpa died right after they got out of Manyangan. And in his neighborhood in Sinahanya, he's like the older brother to many of the other kids that didn't have fathers. Either they died in the war or they left the families. But from him, I learned about hard work and being humble, but also being proud of who you are and being strong. That's the leadership that I emulate, both patient and understanding, but also strong and loving. I have a unique vantage point, at least in politics, because, I was a teenager when I met Ricky Berdalian. I'm one of the few politicians or leaders my age that actually had interactions with him. I used to work for his wife when I was in high school. I worked for Governor Gutierrez. I worked for Robert Underwood. I'm the partner of Governor Liu. So every single leader that the Democrats have pushed forward or who have aspired to be the leader of the Democrats to lead the island, I've had an opportunity to work with them. And it's been excellent to learn from them, to learn from all their life experiences. Well, if that happens, then we accept the decision of the court, and my time and attention will do a little shift. It'll include making sure that I am there to be the father figure for my nephews, to make sure that I'll do my responsibility to being a caregiver to my mom, all at the same time with fighting for and pushing the agenda of the island. And I am up to that. I'm prepared, and I won't be dissuaded in that job. What I would say is that even in your own homes, it is nearly impossible to know and be responsible for the actions of even the closest members of your family that you love and trust. Sometimes your own trust gets betrayed, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to give up or step away from my family members. I trust them that they are going to make the right decisions. And when family members don't make the right decisions, then they have to account for those bad decisions. Doesn't mean that I'm going to love them any less. It just means that perhaps things change in the dynamic of your own family. I have 3 nephews, 2 from my sister and another one that's real close to me. And I always think about being there for them. That's the inspiration to do the best that I can, because I think that they're so talented. I worry about them, and I feel like I need to do the best job I can so that they are going to have the best shot in life to do what they need to do. and live a good life.
I'm Josh Tenorio.
And I'm Tina, and we approve this message.
Welcome back to the show. It's 8:11 a.m. on Thursday, May 28, 2026. My name is Troy Torres. This is the morning news analysis. It's the Thursday news analysis. I have a Ricola in my mouth. That's why it's moving weird. Yesterday, David Lubofsky got a note that I am sure was, to say the least, cathartic for him. But I have to imagine it does nothing to assuage his feeling of injustice, because it does nothing to assuage my feeling of injustice. And Asher Dean Lubofsky, the boy at the center of this, who died when he was 5 years old on October 31, 2018, and I'll get back to that chronology, is not my son, it's his son. So I have to imagine the sense of outrage must have crept back as David Lubofsky read this letter from the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, signed by its chairman, Dr. Nate Berg. It's addressed to him. It's subject notice of resolution and disciplinary action, complaint number GBME-CO-20, that's the year 2020-005. This correspondence serves as formal notification that the Guam Board of Medical Examiners has concluded its investigation into the complaint filed against Dr. Dennis Sarmiento. Upon review of the evidence and documentation, the board has determined that there is a sufficient evidentiary and legal basis to warrant a finding that a violation of the Physicians Practice Act has occurred. Pursuant to the authority vested in this body under Article 8-8.b of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners Administrative Rules and Regulations adopted December 26, 2001, the board has implemented the following disciplinary actions. 1. Public letter of reprimand to be maintained within the practitioner's permanent licensing file. 2. Completion of a physician assessment program. And 3. Payment of investigative fees incurred by the board. Thank you for bringing this matter to the board's attention. Sincerely, Nathaniel Berg, MD, chair of the board. This represents the final leg of action that can conceivably be taken against the people who were involved in the care of Asher Dean Lubofsky between, I believe, the start date of the supposed care was either October 29 or October 30, 2018, to his death in the early morning of October 31, 2018. And this is a very sad story. And had it not been for the perseverance and the courage of David Lubofsky to share his grief over all of these years and turn that grief into a mission to change things in Guam so that these things don't happen to other fathers and mothers, so much would not have been done. I don't even know whether we would be at a resolution today by the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. This might be the first time in the last 6 years, 7 years, 8 years that the Guam Board of Medical Examiners has issued a finding adverse to a physician. Now, the question is it enough? And in the context of our humanity, what's ever going to be enough when it comes to the compensation of a life lost, especially of a 5-year-old boy who died in the arms of his father? I want to take you back to what this story is all about. And it's a story that is close to my heart and very close to Kandit's heart because it was among the first investigative pieces that we ever did. And this was before we were ever a serious operation. But I mean, we've always been an operation that had some type of heart. We were always mission oriented even before we became something more professional. And this was one of those first things. It was this look into the Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act based on what happened to Asher-Dean Lubofsky. So first, a long time ago, I think it was back in the 1980s, the Guam legislature, in order to attract more doctors to come to Guam, enacted the Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act. It replaced some law. I cannot remember what it was. I remember I did a story about this, but I can't remember exactly the details. But this act, what it said was, in order for, if you are a survivor of medical malpractice, or if you are the loved one of someone who died because of medical malpractice, you can have some relief. You can basically sue for liability, but you got to go through an arbitration panel first. And since there's no arbitration panel in Guam, and it's the American arbitration something, you got to get those people to agree who are in the States. You got to fly them over. You got to pay for their expenses. You got to pay their fees. If you have a lawyer, you got to pay your lawyer's fees and all that. And the doctor would, of course, be responsible for paying his or her own lawyer's fees. But that's it. The only person on the hook for all those fees is the patient or the patient's survivors. And I don't know how this went unnoticed for so long. It really went generally unnoticed until the issue of Asher-Dean Lubofsky's death came up. But even a federal court judge was like, hey, the only people who can afford, and only after you get, only after you either not satisfied with the arbitration panel ruling or whatever, can you take a matter to court. You cannot access the trial court. You cannot access the superior court or the district court or whatever until you go through this arbitration. And because of all the expenses that you have to pay, arbitration costs, at the time it was 5 figures, then it climbed to 6 figures. It's now 6 figures. You got to have 6 figures of cash in order to go through this arbitration process. And so even a federal court judge was like, hey, in order for you to access the courts, if you have a dispute regarding malpractice, is if you've got money. And that places a whole lot of people away from accessing the courts. Okay, so that's the law, right? I can't remember if there was a medical meeting between Asher-Dean Lubofsky and his physician at SDA Clinic on October 29, 2018, but I know there was something on October 30, 2018. On October 30, 2018, I know that David Lubofsky brought his son for medical attention twice. I just cannot remember the first date. The second time was on October 30, 2018, when Asher-Dean Lubofsky was getting worse. And so he went to SDA Clinic. That's where they received their primary care. And Asher-Dean Lubofsky's doctor is Dr. Shin Miyagi. I don't know whether he's still at SDA or on Guam or whatever, right? But according to David Lubofsky, it took a while for them to be seen. And then when they were seen, the entire examination took about 10 minutes, like 10 to 15 minutes or something like that, for an examination that in David Lubofsky's research should have taken 45 minutes to an hour. And all of the questions that Lubofsky was asking the doctor, according to Lubofsky, were shrugged off, were met with a level of arrogance that said, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm the doctor. I know what I'm saying. And also, Lubofsky's sense that he was being rushed. But Lubofsky was concerned, and as a parent, saying, I know my son, this does not sound right. And eventually, after an episode at SDA clinic, where the clinic even threatened to call the police on Lubofsky while his son was literally dying. At the time, they didn't know he was dying, but he was dying, right? An ambulance came and they took Asher Dean Lubofsky to Guam Memorial Hospital. And from the time, and this is not just according to David Lubofsky, this is according, a couple years later, the Guam Memorial Hospital. And this was one of the things that it was one of these issues where I looked at Lillian Perez Posadas, longtime professional who had, served our public well. And I thought, wow, Lillian Perez Posadas, how could you have done that? How could you have done this? Right? And it was the CMS report, because CMS did a surprise inspection of GMH. And GMH did not publish this report, did not let the public know about this report. So we got a copy of the report, and the report's findings were significant. And the fact that there were so many adverse findings in this report, essentially, that Guam Memorial Hospital was so unfit as a facility where people should be receiving a standard of care, that a couple people had died. All these protocols were not being followed. And in the case of Asher Dean Lubofsky, a physician never came to see this boy the entire time that he was there. He was given Tylenol for children, I think it was. There were certain protocols that the hospital had that were just completely ignored by the nursing staff who were supposed to be attending to Asher Dean Lubofsky. And according to David Lubofsky, he several times called to the attention of the nursing staff, asked for the doctor, begged for the doctor, several times called certain issues to the attention of the nursing staff, like, why is my son wheezing? Why is there a crackling sound coming from my son while he's breathing? It's worse than the wheezing now. How come it looks like my son can't breathe? He's struggling to breathe. Something's wrong, something's wrong. Please get us emergency care. Please, please, please. Throughout the night, Asher Dean Lubofsky's condition worsened and worsened, and Guam Memorial Hospital ignored this little boy. He was 5 years old, and in the morning of October 31, he died in his father's arms. And so, of course, David Lubofsky was out for some justice, not just for his son, but to prevent another parent from being him. And he has carried this pain this entire time. And undeniable. And also, like, how could I ever understand that type of grief? I don't have any children, much less have lost a child. And so he set out on a collision course with the elite of this island. And even though all the odds were against this guy, he has managed to cause some change and to set this collision course, because the collision has happened. Reform is just a matter of time away. There are some doctors who are absolutely opposed to the reform of the Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act, but I think they see the writing that's on the wall and how the public and even a federal court asking, how come we don't have access to the courts when something wrong happens to us in this case? Why are doctors the only protected class in this sense? And that's on That's just on the medical malpractice side, right? There have been other avenues of relief, other ways of addressing this issue, not toward the same, not for the same purpose and not toward the same goals, but other ways of at least employing accountability. And those ways are built into the same system that has given us the Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act, unfortunately. And this kind of goes to Samuel Kim's whole point about it doesn't work when the people doing the policing are the police themselves. The legislature, in its infinite wisdom, and I say that in infinite jest, has decided that the way professional bodies are going to be licensed or are going to be regulated is by placing those same professionals on the regulation boards. So on the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners, it's filled with nurses. The Guam Board of Medical Examiners, it's filled with doctors. I mean, there are some other people on it, but the majority are doctors, the majority are nurses. In the Guam Police Department, it's the Guam Police Department Internal Affairs Division. In the Guam Board of Allied Health, it's veterinarians and counselors or whatever, whoever all those allied health people are, right? And of course, and you know, these professionals will say, oh, I can be completely objective. No, you can't. That's just not how it works, especially because we're such a small island and you guys do referrals and business with each other all the time. There ain't no way you can be 100% objective or even 50% objective. Come on. Let's not kid ourselves here. So had it not been for David Lubofsky making a big stink over the last several years, no, we would not have known because the media just hasn't done its job, right? We would not have known that GBME has not found for the patient in the last several years. We would not have known that several complaints have been waiting for adjudication by the GBME. We would not have seen the public displays of arrogance by some of the members of this board and the board of nursing the board of nurse examiners, the sorts of things that they say about patients and the public and what it is that we are or are not entitled to know about these matters. We would not have known about the things that they wanted to keep secret about the people who they were licensing to come into Guam. Had it not been for David Lubofsky and his journey the past several years. But think about this. It was in 2018 that Asher Dean Lubofsky died. Some time ago, there was some type of settlement or something. The part of this that involves SDA Clinic is not a public matter, but there was some type of resolution there. Complaints were brought to the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners for the nurses involved in Asher Dean Lubofsky's death. And there's an entire CMS report, an independent report by the federal government that talks about this. And a few days ago, according to a story in KUAM, the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners, they dismissed the cases. Nothing's going to happen to those nurses because according to the chairman of the board, Greg Woodard or something, or Woodward, they have endured enough. We've never even known their names. The public has never even known their names. Are they still GMH nurses? Do we have something to worry about? Now, according to the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners, there has not been an incident over the last 6 years. According to them, enough time has lapsed in order for the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners to be able to determine that this was a one-off. Imagine that a death of a 5-year-old boy is a one-off, right? And that enough time has lapsed for the board to be able to determine that it's not going to happen again because it hasn't happened in the last 8 years, 7 years, 8 years. The only reason enough time has lapsed is because the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners sat on this that long. There should have been a punishment long ago. And there needs to be some sort of an assurance to us as a community that this is not going to happen again because these nurses were sent to training, they were educated more, they were disciplined in this kind of way over at GMH. They are remorseful. They feel bad about the death of Asher Dean Lubofsky. We get none of that from this government. And we're just supposed to expect and accept that GMH is still okay. And then yesterday, we got news that there's a public letter of reprimand over the last doctor. There's another doctor, too. I cannot remember the name. So there's two doctors who were involved or who were supposedly responsible in the care of Asher Dean Lubofsky over at GMH. This is the last one. And this is how it ends. It ends with a public letter of reprimand. It ends with this doctor paying investigative fees incurred by the board and a completion of a physician assessment program. The violation that they're talking about is a violation of the Physicians Practice Act. I don't know how I feel about, no, I'm lying. I know how I feel. I feel like the Guam Board of Medical Examiners has really screwed us, the people. I feel like not only has it been a long time for the Guam legislature to reform, not repeal, but reform the Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act. Remember, it almost passed. Therese Terlahi's bill with number 112 in the 36th legislature almost passed, if not for the doctor lobby, who vociferously opposed any type of reform because they wanted the status quo. You even had a doctor who, thankfully, the legislature refused to allow her confirmation to the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, who went up against this reform effort and then within a few days cut off one of the senators who was receiving cancer treatment from her, Senator Telo Taidagui, who had spoken in favor of reforming that act, cut her off from treatment, from her services. So not only is it time for the legislature to reform this act and to have the courage to do so, but it's also time for the legislature to reform how these professional bodies are regulated. Because it's not just that it's obvious, but the data shows that if you allow the police to police themselves, there will always be corruption. On the other side of the commercial break, we'll get to Mary Torres, congressional candidate. She is calling out Congressman Jim Moylan and asking what the heck is he doing because 7,000 people in just May 29, May 30, May 31, in just 4 days are going to lose their SNAP benefits. Stick with us. We'll talk about that on the other side of this commercial break. So Mary Torres, she's running for Congress. She is here in Guam. She is a Republican and competing against Jim Moylan, the current office holder for the Republican nomination to challenge Alicia Limtiaco in November. She's like, where are you, Jim? And this has to do with the 7,000 people who face SNAP loss. And this is according to a news release from her yesterday. Republican congressional candidate Mary Camacho Torres on Wednesday called on Delegate James Moylan to provide a public explanation after nearly 7,000 Guam residents were identified as being at risk of losing SNAP benefits despite the delegate's previous public assurances that Guam recipients would not see cuts tied to federal benefit changes. In a letter to Moylan, Torres cited statements he made during a June 2025 online press conference in which he said, quote, "It's clear to our office and to the administration that there are no cuts," end quote, and assured Guam residents that SNAP recipients would receive their full benefit payments unless fraud, waste, or abuse was involved. Quote, "These assurances are inconsistent with what Guam residents are now facing," end quote. According to the Department of Public Health and Social Services Director Teresa Arreola, approximately 6,956, I wonder why they say approximately and then they give an exact number, right? You would say approximately 7,000, but you wouldn't say approximately 6,956. That's okay anyway. Approximately 6,956 Guam residents classified as able-bodied adults without dependents, or ABODs, are now at risk of losing SNAP benefits. Arreola has publicly estimated the financial impact at more than $3 million per month from Guam households and the local economy. Torres said that's a big deal, by the way, that whole economy thing, like on top of course, the households thing being a big deal. The $3 million away from, and let's be real, this is not really going to come out of Pay Less, Cost You Less, and Happy Mart. This is more going to affect the smaller stores. Because we're talking about a lot of people who don't have transportation. And so what do they do to get their groceries? They walk to the store unless someone's going to take them to the store. But this is really going to affect the smaller stores. Torres said the issue requires more than explanation after the fact. Quote, "Public assurances carry weight, especially when families rely on them to understand whether they will be able to put food on the table. If the information given to the people of Guam was inaccurate, then our community deserves to know why, what changed, and what is being done now to protect them," end quote. The ABOD work requirements now being enforced on Guam require recipients to work 20 or more hours per week or 80 hours per month in an approved work program. Torres also noted that federal changes expanded the definition of ABODs to include older adults and parents of teenagers who were previously exempt. In her letter, Torres asked Moylan to answer several questions publicly, including whether his office understood pending federal legislation could expand SNAP work requirements to Guam, what actions his office has taken to protect affected residents, and whether he advocated for Guam-specific exemptions or modifications during the legislative process. Torres also called on Moylan to hold a public informational briefing for residents directly affected by the changes. Quote, "Nearly 7,000 people are now on the verge of losing food assistance. Guam deserves clear answers, urgent action, and representation that understands the real cost of getting this wrong," end quote. Mary Torres is right. Jim Moylan needs to say something about this. And I think we should all have an expectation of whoever our congressman or congresswoman is at a time like this, that something is being done to address this issue. This is not a small thing. 7,000 people who are about to lose their food security. And it's not even full food security. The average that these people get is $400 a month. $400 a month is not enough to eat on this island. No matter how cheap you think groceries can be at wherever it is that you shop, especially if you do not have reliable transportation, and especially if you are caring for children who are above the age of 14, and especially if those are at-risk children or children who have behavioral problems. I mean, just the snowball effect of something like this is incredible. And then what about, this is what the right never wants to talk about, as they do this to people who they believe are just abusing the system because they don't know how to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, as they give billions of dollars to Argentina and to fight a war that nobody wanted and nobody asked for and presented no imminent threat. And as they give billions of dollars in tax breaks to billionaires. By the way, just as a little bit of an off here, just while I'm remembering something. One of the things that I think many people glossed over in those taped recordings of the summer 2025 negotiations between Cortec and the government of Guam, and this is something I'm going to hone in on, is how they had a discussion. I think it was meeting 5. They had a discussion about how it was that the governor's office was trying to get the legislature to keep the 5% BPT so that they could afford the $16.3 million in annual lease payments to Cortec. And I found it very interesting that Cortec, a billion-dollar corporation or conglomerate on this island, didn't even flinch about keeping the BPT at 5%, which is an indication that the money to be received from the Simon Sanchez deal is more, much more than the money they would pay in the business privilege tax. I just wanted to put that out there. But anyway, going back, one of the things that they never talk about regarding these ABODs is what if many of them are on Medicaid for a debilitating disease and they cannot get off of Medicaid because if they did, they would not be able to afford the medication that they need in order to live, in order to survive. Whether that's insulin or cancer medication, whatever the case may be, whatever infectious disease that they have. And because the income thresholds are different for SNAP and Medicaid, they're much more sensitive for Medicaid. If they get a job and if they work the 80 hours in a month, they're going to lose the Medicaid. So in a choice between, you know what, I can ask people for food, I can look for food, I can scrounge for food, I can not eat on some days, but I really can't do without my medication, they're going to choose to lose their food security. While we applaud this evil regime for sending billions of our tax dollars to fight a war we didn't want, give it to Argentina, fight more wars, and make billionaires more rich. Disgusting. Just disgusting. Mary Torres is absolutely right. We need answers from the congressman, and we need those answers stat. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You all have a wonderful day. I appreciate all of you for joining me this morning. And tonight, you know, what I think I want to talk about tonight, I've been reading very interesting stuff on Jungle Watch. And Tim Rohr has been writing some stuff that, you know, really does speak to a lot of things that we value here at Kandit. And that is, you know, the elite class and the oligarchy that has controlled systems and that has corrupted things. And the intersection that Jungle Watch makes with the church, it's an interesting one, especially when you consider the current alliances that seem to be being built between the administration and the church these days that are worrisome. I think that's what we'll talk about tonight. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You all have a beautiful morning, and God bless you all.
Spot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam Auto Spot, where the savings never stop.
This stuff's hitting the spot.